Hey guys and gals, and welcome to another video from the team here at UnrealTek.net, a division of BlenderTek.com. Today, in the second video in the Unreal Engine 4 Workflow with Substance Painter series, we will be looking at the user interface and the controls so that we know how to use the program. Right now I've just opened a basic mesh so that we have everything available to you. So if you want to do that, what you can do is File, New, and then all you need to do is under Mesh, select a mesh, and it supports pretty much everything around, even dot blends. I guess you could import a dot blend if it was UV unwrapped. However, it isn't. So anyways, I just have a basic cube thing with some scaled inset faces that I used for testing Substance Painter. So it's nice because it has crevices and flat surfaces and just one material that you can paint on all over. So moving on to the UI, I think we've covered most of everything in the intro video. So again, we have our textures set, so we can add or remove textures here. We can change our working size on the fly, and we can bake our textures, which we'll get into because that's very important for lots of the procedural stuff. Then we have our texture set list. So this is all the materials you have in your mesh. Now, if you have multiple materials and you just want to work on one, you can hit the solo button and you'll just be working on that. We have only one material though, so obviously we're only working with all of them. But if you had multiple ones, you can use solo to just work on one at a time. And you can also click this little white button to turn them on and off. So this is useful for being able to view your entire mesh at once. But once you start painting, if you have multiple materials, whatever material you have selected will show and allow you to paint on it, but all of the other ones will disappear temporarily while you're painting. And you can turn that on or off, but it's very useful. So under viewer settings, the next one, we have a mode. So right now we're under material mode, which allows us to choose a shader, obviously. We can choose an environment map if we want to change that. We can change its opacity. So I usually like to prefer to work with just a background like this. But you can use for shadows and stuff an environment map. Obviously the exposure and the blur of your environment map. And you can also add shadows to your mesh. So all, most, or main. So to help you visualize what it's going to look like in game. Your shader parameters, you can up the AO up or down. Right now we don't have it baked, so that does nothing. The height force for working with height maps, which get converted into normal maps. So that's how strong is the height going to be. So if I go in here and if I paint something that's moderately high, you can see it's sticking out there. If I change the height force, as you can see, it's going to make it less or more strong, so you can adjust that. And this will have an effect on your output. Quality, you can go between high and low. There's little difference, so I'll just stick it on medium. And emissive quality, if you are painting an emissive map and you are painting glowy bits, then what that means is the emissive intensity will change how emissive it is. I have to go and actually add emissiveness. I did not do that. Emiss, there we go. We can choose an emissive color, so it will glow red there now. So yeah, you can change the emissive intensity from 0 to 10 just like that. Stencil opacity, when we're working with stencils, that's just how obviously how much opacity they have. You can hide the stencil when painting, just like the materials hide when you're in painting, or you can have the stencil show. You can go into wireframe mode. As you can see, it shows wireframe, and you can change the color and opacity. Sometimes that helps. We have post effects. Again, we went over that in the last video. We have our shelf. We went over that in the last video. We have our brushes, particles, and tools. We went over that in the last video. We went over materials and smart materials. So our layers, I'll go over this quickly. So you can choose a different map if you want. So you can go between all the different maps. I'm going to get rid of emissive because we rarely use that. I tend to just work on base color generally, but if you want, you can work on a per map basis. But height, roughness, and metallic are all generated automatically based on all your different colors here, since height, roughness, and metallic are all grayscale, more or less. However, if you added a smart material to your base color here, it will automatically add it if required to the other layers. So you don't worry if you're only working in your base color. 99% of the time that will be just fine. If I add a map to my, or sorry, a new layer to my base color and go to my height map, it's there as well. If I add one to my metallic layer 3, it's there as well. Different things will work on different layers. For example, if I was to turn off all of this, I'd only be painting my base color for layer 3. If I go to roughness, again, I'm just painting on my base layer, even though I've turned roughness off. So if I was to display next channel, roughness, as you can see, that painting doesn't show up. Even though we're painting a base color, the roughness doesn't show up because we turned it off and we're on the roughness layer. But like I said, for all purposes, like 99.99% of the time, you can just work in the base color layer and just create your layers there. So yeah, basically, we'll go through the buttons. What you have here is add effect, so you can add a generator to a layer. And so you can select a generator or you can drag and drop. So let's say in the generators I wanted mask generator dirt, I would just drag and drop it in, and it's now given me a mask generator dirt. That's not going to do anything because we don't have anything to mask off and we don't have our inputs, but that's what you can do. You can just go ahead and add stuff like that. Let's undo that. You can also add paint, so that's just like a basically a color. You can see we have the options down here. So yeah, that one basically we are painting. So add fill, so that just fills it with a color. So you see we have the fill options here. You can choose different options. You could choose a different color. So that's our properties for fill. So when you select something, if I select this layer, I get the properties for that paint layer. If I select this fill effect, I get the properties for the fill effect. So you're always working with these two windows in sync, basically, I guess you could call it. And so yeah, you can also add levels, so you can adjust your output levels. And you can add a filter. So they have, I don't know, a bunch of filters, but we need image inputs to make that useful. However, that is that. And there's also color selection, but we can't use that on this kind of layer. So then we have configure mask. So we can just add a regular white or black mask. So I'll often work with a black mask. So as you can see, what that does is it gives me two layers. I have my base layer here. Okay, you're being funny on me. Probably because we have a mask. So let me illustrate that exactly. So yeah, I'm just painting a bunch of stuff on here that you can't see right now. But if we then go to our mask, right now, since it's a white mask, I think I added, or did I add a black mask? I added a black mask. So yeah, I added a black mask, and so if I select this, you can see it's got this red box around it. So that means you've got it selected. So now what I do is I come down to my properties and I choose my color. So this is a mask. So if I want to mask it off, I paint in black. If I want to unmask it, I paint in pure white. As you can see, I can unmask it. And also you can change your tool size with the square bracket keys, just like in Photoshop. So yeah, as you can see, I can unmask it as I want, or I could mask it just 50% or mask it just 10%. So that's how a simple mask layer like that works. And a white mask works the same way, just in reverse. And a bitmap mask works with bitmaps if you don't have any. So basically you'll be using white or black masks depending on. You can also invert them. So again, if I was to do that, and then if I inverted this mask, we would see our effects because we have white. And then if we were to go white, we could mask it off. But then if we were to invert it, obviously it's the difference, so you'll see the inverse. So that's very useful. You can clear the mask. You can export the mask to the file if you need it later for, say, an opacity mask or an emissive mask. But what's very useful is, say you had two layers with two black masks, and let's say in one you had this whole big setup in your mask. What you can do is you can right click, you can copy the mask, and you can go to your other mask, right click, and paste the mask. Now I know it'll be hard to see, but it copied it exactly. So that can be very useful when you need to mask off two of the same layers with the same mask. Also, if you have a masked layer, let's just go back and remove that back to straight black. You can add our things again: color, filter, levels, fill, paint, generator. So if I add generator and then go to my generators and select one, such as mask builder, maybe will work offhand, maybe, sort of. So you can see we have some options for building a mask here. So yeah, but obviously you need all these inputs. So that you can add stuff to a mask. You can add paint. You can paint a mask that already paints. You can add fill if you just want to fill the whole thing. So yeah, you can add that just like you can to any layer. So masks are essentially kind of like a layer on a layer, but obviously they're for masking stuff off. So we have our masks, and then we have the next one, edit layer, which allows you to just cut, paste, duplicate, whatever. Next, you have the plus button for creating a new layer. Works just like in Photoshop. It's a new transparent layer. You have add a fill layer. So what that does is it adds a layer that is completely filled. So if I change it to red, it fills it completely with red. So that's a fill layer. And then you can go and you can add a mask, add a generator, and just pick one, and as you can see, just like that. So that's how fast it can happen. So that's what a fill layer does. It just fills whatever you decide here. You can fill a material, you can fill a base color, etc. So as you can see, I've just filled it with bark, and then you can mask it off later if you want. So that's what a fill layer does. So if something's not working, sometimes try adding a fill layer, because some things will only work with a fill layer applied. Then we have add a smart material, which is obviously in the toolbar down here. So you can add something like this gold or whatever, or I guess I got plastic rubber. So this adds a bunch of layers automatically. So what I've got here is I've got a fill layer with a with actually a looks like a paint mask. Either way, it's a mask that has levels, blur, fill, fill, fill. And so we've also got details, surface details. It's got a mask which has a fill. We've got the base color. So again, it's just a base color here, although we could change that if we wanted red plastic rubber. But you can also just you can drag a material in there if you wanted to change your color to a material. Now, that kind of ruins the plastic rubber look, but you still have your surface damages and surface details. So that is what a generator does. So using that can save you a lot of time. So we have like skin bald head, skin calf, skin facial hair, all sorts of good ones. So as you can see, I can't just drag and drop this right in the layer list sometimes. See, fill layers are not paintable. So if I add a fill layer, then I can drag that on because it's a material. Sorry, I was trying to get to smart material. So skin human, we can just drag and drop that right into the layer list, and there we have it. Human skin as in 1K, as interpreted as best as they can without any baked textures. So lastly, after the smart material here, we have folders, so you can organize things into folders just like smart materials are, just like that. So that can help you organize when you have hundreds of layers. And obviously you have the minus to remove a selected layer. So that is layers. Basically, again, in the properties, all you have to think of is you have your brush options. So you have your brush options here. You can the size, the flow, the spacing, etc. You can add an alpha on top of it. We have dirt, or we can just remove it, and it just gives you a basic block square brush. So you have that. Your alpha can also just be a uniform color, so you could say I want this to be 10% alpha, so very, very, very translucent. You can also add a stencil. We don't have any, so we could choose a generator like letters, so we could paint an R if we wanted. And so you can see that hide stencil from when painting option right now. If we turn it off, that's how that works. So yeah, that's how stencils work. And when you want to remove it, just hit the X in the properties. Then we have material. So right now our material has our color, our height, our roughness, and our metallic settings. Now, since this already has a material plugged into it, it's all set up and it has parameters. Now, if you were to make your own material, your material would have parameters. So our parameters for this material that we're painting with are just color, so we could go to red, as well as A. I don't really know what A is. They didn't name that very well. I think that's alpha. And then roughness. So how rough is it? How shiny is it, basically? But if we were to remove this material, if we were just painting with a regular color, let's say red again, we have our red color. Our brush is very alpha, so I'm just going to turn that back up to full white, as in fully opaque. So you choose a base color. If you just want to do regular color painting, which you do lots of times, you can go to your color, you can choose a base uniform color, so we could just paint pure red. But you also have height, so you could go all the way pure negative, what is it, negative 1, and so that would obviously have it as if it was down. We could turn up the intensity of the height force to see that more, so we could make that as like going down, and this will go into your normal map in the end. And of course, if we go to 0, we have totally flat. If we go to full 1, it's poking out. So that's what the height does. And so if we leave height at about 0, we have our uniform base color. We also have roughness. So if we were to go to full roughness, it's not going to reflect anything. Or, yeah. And if we were to go to pure black, it's going to be very shiny. It's kind of hard to tell, but as you can see, it's very shiny. But if we leave it at 0.5, that's just a regular average roughness. A little bit of shininess, but not much. And then we have metallic. So if we were to bump that up to pure white, we get a metallic material. So you can see that's changed. If we change the roughness down to 0, we now have a metal that's very shiny and red. So that's what those do. And again, if you were to add another channel such as emissive, you can then click to enable that. So again, yeah, you can turn them off too. If you just want to paint pure color, you can just paint pure color by turning all of them off with these buttons here. If you just want to paint height, you can just paint height. So as you can see, I am just painting away basically like a normal map. No color, no nothing. So very useful. And if I want roughness, just roughness, I can do that. If I want to make this not as shiny, or if I want to make it just pure metallic, I can do that. I can do that. And then emissive, so that's obviously for glowing, so we can make stuff glow if we turn up the emissive intensity. And of course, as always, you can always combine them into one. So that is the properties with painting. Pretty self-explanatory, and layers. So that's those two you will use in tandem a lot. So that is the UI. Onto the controls very quickly. So obviously painting is just left clicking. Oh, I'm gonna go over a few more things. Up here in the top left corner, we have paint. So you can just paint regularly. You also have physical paint. So that's for particles and such, which I'm not going to get into right now, so we'll just stick with regular paint. You also have an eraser, so if you were to paint, you can obviously erase. And there's hotkeys for all this, but I'm not going to get into that directly right now. You have physical eraser too, you can make it randomly erase, but again, we'll just stick with the regular one. Whoops, I clicked that too fast. You have projection, which projects obviously your setup into the panorama to see what it looks like. You can right click on here and you can turn on and off different things, which so we have our log, layers, so you can turn things on and off there. Physical projection. So it's doing something, but you just stick with regular projection most of the time, I would imagine, unless you're working directly with particles. We have geometry decal. That allows you to just select faces. As you can see, we can select triangles, polygons, a mesh, so an entire mesh, or UV coordinates, which I would have to go into 2D view, I believe, to do. Yeah, I can select UV coordinates like that, and I don't know if I'm painting them or not. Let's see. Oh yeah, I guess you can paint it by selection using that. I actually have never used that before. So yeah, you have geometry decal, so you can I guess paint by triangle. As you can see, I've got a color selected. You can paint by triangle by clicking it or clicking and dragging, by face, by shape, or by UVs. Pretty cool. I didn't know that existed. That would come in handy because sometimes it can be very hard to paint accurately just one face, you know? So that would actually come in very useful, and I will have to integrate that into my workflow. I was never taught that, probably because it's this little button hiding. Then on the other side of this little separator, we have symmetry. So you can turn symmetry on or off. So then if I was to go and paint on one side, it's obviously going to paint on the other. And I believe there's settings here. Yeah, you can mirror X, you can mirror Y, and you can mirror Z. And I believe you can turn them all on at once somehow in the settings, in the actual settings. Anyways, next after that divider, we have our 3D, 2D selection. So you can move between 3D and 2D if you want to just paint directly on the texture, or directly in 2D or 3D, sorry, or both at once. And lastly, you have free rotation, which allows you to rotate freely, or constrained rotation, which is regular, which I guess constrains it in some way. That doesn't really make a lot of difference. And then down here we have lazy mouse. If you're not aware what lazy mouse is, basically you can see what that does is right now I'm clicking and dragging, and it's basically lagging behind me. So it tries to emulate a tablet or a paintbrush. As you can see, a regular stroke just fills it, and lazy mouse at full tries to simulate a paintbrush. So that's what lazy mouse is. You can turn that on or off at will. And these little pencil symbols beside things, that just allows you to edit the value directly. So if I wanted 50% opacity of my environment, I just hit that symbol, type in 50, and I get 50%. So instead of using the sliders to try to get it, you can also just type in direct values. So that is the UI. So onto the controls. Now they've done very good in this, and I'll be able to go through it quickly, because if you do something like, say, hold down Control, it tells you exactly all the controls that have to do with control. And you can turn this off in the program settings. If I hold down Shift, I get everything resulting with Shift. If I hold down Alt, I get everything with Alt, sorry. If I hold down Control Alt, everything with Control Alt. If I hold down Control Shift, everything with Control Shift, which is nothing right now. And same with Control Shift. So they make it very easy. But the basic controls, holding down Alt, you can see we have our camera controls. So Alt and left mouse button, click and drag to rotate. Alt and right mouse button to zoom in and out, pretty standard, or just regular scroll wheel on its own. Alt and middle mouse button to pan. And that is it for your camera controls. Very basic. One that I like is Alt Shift. So Alt and Shift at the same time plus left lets you snap to each of the 6 views. You can see my my axis display in the corner here is orthographic. It's still in perspective, but it's orthographically snapped. I can then go, and if I was to move directly into the middle of the mesh, it would be pretty much orthographic right there. If I was to paint right there, I'm painting in perspective again right there. But yeah, I like that snapping sometimes, so that I can get lined up really nicely with something. And then you can go and rotate again, but it's nice because yeah, you can snap, and then you can just pan to work directly on that face, basically. So that is the controls. A couple other things I'll go over really quickly. Obviously we went through the size, so you can change from 128 to any other size right there, and again, it's non-destructive. I want to go over the viewer details really quickly. So we have mode, material, and we went over like the opacity and everything in the last video. If you're to change to mode solo, this is basically just your texture map. This is unlit, this is lit. This is way less memory intensive than if you were to work in material mode, but as you can see, you don't see like the effects of lighting quite as realistically. So I prefer to work in this mode, but then make sure every like 5-10 minutes I just go into material mode and make sure it's looking the way I want it. And additional map, so I could go to my normal map, for example, and see what it looks like. I was to say take the height. Oh, did I turn it off? No. I can see what's happening to my normal map, which is nothing right now because we don't have a normal map baked. But yeah, if you have other maps, you can go into them, but we don't right now. So yeah, that is basically it. We went over the rest in the last video. Like, you have edit project settings, and you can change your mesh, or you can change your normal map format. But as you can see, it will recompute all your channels, and you may lose stuff, and you have basic settings. It's not the greatest, but you have the keyboard helper, like I told you, the world axis. You can change the background color, so I actually prefer to work with a dark blue to a gray, and then you'll see that gives me that nice gradient when I'm working in solo mode. I just find it looks a little more professional and helps. So yeah, that is the basics of the UI and controls in Substance Painter. In the next video, we will create a quick mesh in Blender, and we will unwrap it, and actually we'll create a couple pieces of mesh and unwrap it and assign it to 3 materials. I think that will do everything well, and we'll start learning how to actually use it. So of course it's pretty self-explanatory, but I will show you just some basic workflow, and in the end we will go into exporting. You can export to a ton of presets. There is just the regular channels, so everything we have right here. You have CryEngine, PBR basics, you have Redshift, Unity 4, Unity 5, Unreal Engine 4, V-Ray, etc. So and then you can of course configure, as in change how your meshes are, or sorry, how your textures are labeled, what channels they use for different input maps, different mesh maps you might want to use somewhere, and so on and so forth. But we'll get into that at the end. So thanks again for watching from the team here at UnrealTek.net, a division of BlenderTek.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. We're on social media, on the links on your screen. If you disliked this video for some reason, please tell us why, so we can continually improve our videos based on your community input. We also take requests, so we'll see you next time. Remember, create your way.